Assalamu alaykum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So today, bi'ithnillah, I want to talk about a book on fasting in the month of Ramadan. Bi'ithnillah, the book, it can be seen in the description of this particular video, which is titled Concise Fiqh for Ramadan. This particular book right here, it's a book that can be found on Amazon. The book goes for about, I believe, $9 or less. It is a short, comprehensive book on fasting in Ramadan, which could be read or used by anybody Muslim, somebody who's a new Shahada, a new Muslim who wants to know the in and out of fasting in the month of Ramadan, and it's not overloading them with a lot of information with a lot of pages. It's also good for any Muslim, young or old, new or been Muslim for a long time, who want to review some of the ins and outs of fasting. I am the author of this particular book. I wrote this book maybe a long time ago, and I published it in 2001. I based this particular book on some durus that I used to give in the month of Ramadan when I was an imam, answering some of the questions and answers that common people ask a lot about fasting in Ramadan. We know, and with fasting in Ramadan or preparing for Ramadan, it's best to start preparing. Or the best way to prepare for Ramadan is by reading up on the issues of fasting. What is fasting in Ramadan? How do we know when Ramadan starts? What breaks the fast in Ramadan? Who is Ramadan obligatory upon? For example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He say in Quran, Kutiba alaykum siyam kama kutiba alladhina min qablikum la'allakum tattaqun. Allah says, is prescribed upon you fasting, just like it was prescribed to those before you, and perhaps you were able to attain taqwa, the fear of Allah. So we understand Kutiba alaykum siyam from this ayat in the Quran that fasting in the month of Ramadan, fard ala kulli Muslim. Fard ala kulli Muslim. It is fard upon every Muslim who reach al-bulugh, puberty, right? And I talk about these things in this particular book. The things that are prescribed for the Muslim to do in the month of Ramadan. Who is the fast of Ramadan wajib upon? Who is wajib upon them to fast? What are the signs of puberty in Islam? Some Muslims don't understand. What are the signs of puberty in Islam? Every month of Ramadan, every time I used to be give khutbah or talk or be in the masjid educating the people, I find Muslim youth who are reached puberty not fasting. They be 16 years old, 17 years old, and not fasting because their parents don't know that it's obligatory for those who reach bulugh, puberty in Islam, to fast. Meaning that as soon as the male or young female have hairs in the pubic area between the private parts, this is the sign in Islam that they reach puberty. I don't care how young they look. For the female child, it is her also reaching her mens, and for males, it is a wet dream or the hairs in the private part areas. So all these things I cover in this particular book in Fasting Ramadan. For example, who sights the moon in the month of Ramadan? How do the month of Ramadan start? related to sighting the moon, sighting the hilal, right? Also, I'll talk about in this particular book about fasting in Ramadan, what it means to fast altogether. All right, I bring some evidence from Kitab and Sunnah, from authentic Hadith and Quran relating to fasting in the month of Ramadan. So, some questions or people ask, I notice every year about Ramadan, and I try to summarize these things in a short book. I know a lot of people don't like to read, so I try to make a book that is short and to the point. Short and to the point. This book only have about 43 pages, right? So, for example, who sight the moon in Ramadan? Common question. For sisters, do the breastfeeding or pregnant women fast? Let's cover this in the book. Do the woman who is menstruating, do she fast in the month of Ramadan? This is covered in the book. How do we know when Ramadan start and finish? This is covered in the book. All these questions plus more is covered in this book. You can find the book on Amazon. Amazon paperback and Kindle. If you look in the description of this video, the link for the book is there in the description of the video. How was this book organized? Written, compiled. Well, this book is organized from the curriculum of Madinah University from the Arabic institution. I find it very useful when I was teaching Arabic language to a lot of my students or my community, that they, while learning the Arabic language, you have to be familiarized with fiqh term, and I found that the Medina Arabic Institution curriculum was great for teaching the terminology for basic fiqh. So I took some things from that book, organization from that book, and then I add additional articles and writings. For example, al-Mulakas, al-Fiqhi, from Shaykh Dr. Salih al-Fawzan, Hafidhullah, his book, and questions and answers regarding Ramadan from the Mufti, the former Mufti of Saudi, Shaykh Abdul Adheem Badawi, Rahimahullah. Then from a book, al-Wajeez, Fiqh and Sunnah, from Shaykh Abdul Adheem Badawi, who is a Naibu, the vice president of Ansar Sunnah Muhammadiya in Egypt, who's also a sheikh that I studied with while I was in Egypt for 6 months in his camp, his village. Then I took questions from Shaykh Dr. Salih Uthaymeen, rahimahullah, about sighting the moon and related to what is a Adal Muslim. All right, what is a Adal Muslim? So this book is paperback, questions and answers. I go through in and outs in the book about fasting in English language. Fasting. All right, so the introduction, looking at the introduction of the book. The first chapter of the introduction about the book is about the author. Before we hit the first chapter, about the author. That's myself, right? It's very important about people who you're learning from, that you understand what is their qualifications or their background, so you know who are you learning from. Who are you learning from? So I read it in the about page, or about the author, about my studies, scholars who I study with, and what I study with them. You can find it on the first two pages. Then I enter into the introduction of fasting Ramadan from Shaykh Salih al-Fawzan, Hafidhullah, some of his writings and statements about fasting. Where does the word fasting come from? Sama yusamu, right? It's siyaman, right? So talk about in the introduction of the book, right? Fasting, coming from Shaykh Dr. Salih al-Fawzan, right? What is the wisdom of fasting? So I'm not coming from this book my own personal opinion. I'm coming from Quran and Sunnah and the statements of scholars of Islam who are known for knowledge. Right? Superiority of fasting in the month of Ramadan. So this book, it covers, in short, rulings about fasting in Ramadan. Right? The rulings of fasting, how to establish the beginning and ending of Ramadan. A lot of Muslims in the West do not know. A lot of Muslims in the West, they do not know. A lot of Muslims think, how do you establish the beginning And the ending of fasting Ramadan, they think is by waiting for announcements in the masjid. No. They think Ramadan begins with waiting for an announcement in the masjid that Ramadan is here. No. Ramadan starts by sighting the moon. And Ramadan ends by sighting the moon. Right? Related to seeing the hilal. And his book talks about how do we begin to fast? How do we sight the moon? Who actually sights the moon? What happens if you can't, or the person who's going or responsible for reciting the moon can't see the moon? What do the Muslim body do in the community? I cover this in the ins and outs in the book. All right? And I come with evidence from Quran and Sunnah. From Quran and Sunnah, from some of the scholars you heard me mention in the beginning, that the derivative or where I got the material for this particular book in my writing. Then I talk about, after that, the pillars of fasting, which is very important. What are the pillars of fasting in Islam? What are the pillars of actually fasting? A lot of Muslims in the West, and Muslims in general, don't know what are the pillars of fasting, which are only two, right? First one is what? An-niyat, and the second one is the sawm, the actual fast itself, right? So the first pillar, right, of the fast are two. One is niyat, and the second is imsak, right? And I bring some evidence, right? Very important for Muslims to know. So whoever want to purchase the book, you can find it on Amazon. All you have to do is look at the title, put up the title, Concise Fiqh for Ramadan, and the book should pop up on Amazon. Concise Fiqh for Ramadan by Abul Muhammad Amriki. And this is the cover of the book. You can find also in the description of this video. You can also find it in the description of this video. So what are the pillars of fasting? 2. Who is wajib? Who is Ramadan? Who is Ramadan fast wajib upon? Who is Ramadan's fast wajib upon? As I mentioned earlier in this video, a lot of Muslims don't know who the fast is actually wajib upon and who it's not. All right, I cover this in the book. The signs of bulugh. Those who are chronically ill. Those who are sick, do they fast or break their fast? Do they make up their fast? Things like this. Women in their mens, cover this in this issue. Women who are pregnant, cover in this issue. Women who are breastfeeding, I cover in this issue. All right? What is desired for the fasting person? What the fasting person should be doing and staying away from while they are fasting. All right? What are the fasting person should be doing and what they should stay away from while fasting. This is covered in the book. For example, suhoor, right? Things to stay away from, like cupping, right? Things to leave alone. I cover all these ins and outs in this particular chapter, coming with evidence from Quran and Sunnah, right? The nullifiers of the fast. What actually breaks the fast? What actually nullifies the fast? This is also covered in this particular book. What actually nullifies the fast? Nullifies the fast. Very important topic. Very important issue. I remember one year, many years ago, like 15 to maybe 15 years ago, I was in front of a masjid in New York, Masjid Farouk. Masjid Farouk is in Brooklyn on Atlantic Avenue. And this in the day hours of fasting, this Moroccan guy came up to me and said, "Hey man, I'm dressed like this to wear my thobe in front of the masjid. And it's in the day hours while we fasting." This Moroccan guy in suit and tie came up to me and is like, "Do you have a light for his cigarette? All right? Do you have a light?" He asked me, "Do I have basically matches for his cigarettes? He's smoking. He wants to smoke in his day hours. It's throughout the fasting hours." I'm like, "Yeah, this is Ramadan. We're fasting." He's like, Ramadan, we fasting? I'm like, yeah, you can't be smoking. Smoking. A common thing that we find Muslims doing in the day hours of fasting in Ramadan. I find some Muslims from certain countries, while we're fasting, they smoking cigarettes. Come out the masjid smoking cigarettes. I'm not talking about time to break fast. I'm talking about while we're fasting in the day hours. I see people go to pray door and puffing cigarettes. Very important. What are the nullifiers of the fast? What happened if you eat intentionally? I cover this in the book. All right? What happened if you have a wet dream? I cover this in the book. What happened if you have sexual intercourse during the day hours of this? I cover this in the book. All right? So this talks about what are the nullifiers of the fast? Like menses, eating and drinking intentionally, and purging, and things like this. All right? Taking shots, going to the doctor, giving blood, all these things. I covered it in this book. What is disliked in fasting? I cover this also in the book. So questions and answers, chapter 9, about fasting. If the fast of the one who does not pray accepted. This is a big issue. That's very important. The one who is fasting but don't make salah. Very common. Very common. I find Muslims who don't pray but fast in Ramadan but don't make no salah. I cover this issue in this book. This is a major issue because fasting is wajib. It is fard. It is from the 5 pillars of Islam. Also, the salah is from the 5 pillars of Islam. The salah is from the 5 pillars of Islam. So the one, if he's neglecting one pillar, like not making no salah, but he's fasting, is his fast is correct or not? What about the one who is lazy and he's not praying out of laziness, miss some salah? What about his fast? If his fasts are correct? I cover this in the book, coming from Quran and Sunnah and Kalam min Ahlul. Kalam min Ahlul. I have here a question and answer related to the topic by Shaykh bin Baz, rahimahullah, by Shaykh bin Baz, rahimahullah, about the one who fasts but don't pray. Don't pray. The etiquettes of reciting Quran in the month of Ramadan. The etiquettes of fasting in the month of Ramadan. I cover this particular issue related to fasting. So if anybody wants to purchase the book will only be found. The book can only be found on Amazon. Concise Fiqh For Ramadan. You could go to Amazon. You could put the title of this book, or you could look in the description of this video, which I have the link of this book in the description of the video. So if you want to a quick read, new Muslim, new Shahada, wants to understand fasting, somebody been Muslim for a long time, and just want to know, let's review something because they're preparing for fasting, want to know a little about ins and outs, you could definitely read this book and get much of the reviewing or answers you need to know about simply how to fast in the month of Ramadan and what is consistent with fasting, what breaks the fast, and some information for yourself. Even some things related inside and outside of Ramadan, I even touch it in this book. Alright? سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك واشهد ان لا اله الا انت واستغفرك واتوب اليك. Who sights the moon in Ramadan? Do the breastfeeding or a pregnant woman fast? How do we know when Ramadan start and finish? And what are the invalidators of the fast? All these questions plus more answered in this short book.